This episode was recorded on June 20th, 2025, during the virtual meeting titled The Evolving Landscape of Transnational Organized Crime. This was the first of a series of events prepared by ParlAmericas for parliamentarians in the lead up to the 10th Summit of the Americas. Listen to Tonni Brodber, head of the United Nations Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, talk about the gendered dimensions of violence linked to criminal organizations. Ms. Brodber outlines many crucial points about security in the Americas and Caribbean, presenting data and new trends on violence and the hemisphere. She also emphasizes the importance of engaging parliaments and civil society to increase trust and to find inclusive and community-based solutions.
I want to start off by saying, generally, the way we approach this is not to think of it as we're only talking about women. We're talking about looking at women because generally, when we look at the situations and the vulnerabilities that cause women to be marginalized, this seems to be a bit of a canary in the coal mine for all of the population, for youth, for men, for many others. And so we start there. I just want to give a little bit about the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund, which is where I work now. I know many of you on the call from my previous role as the head of UN Women for the Caribbean region. Now, the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund is a multi-partner trust fund, and it's a global partnership between the UN system, member states, and civil society. And we have three main roles, and that's to break the silos between the humanitarian, peace, security, and development finance space. Also to address financing gaps that exist for women's participation, especially in key phases of crisis and response, and also to improve policy coherence. And we can't do that without parliamentarians. Now, what was always interesting to me, especially when I was asked to apply for this position, is we speak about conflict very specifically within the UN system. Yet, when you look at organized crimes and the death as a result of organized crime, we are looking at a situation in which we see more deaths from organized crime than in all the official armed conflicts combined during that same period. And unfortunately, many of these deaths and homicides are within the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, a very beautiful, paradisical region, but this is our contradiction. In Belize, we see that 65% of the women and girls murdered were victims of gender-related killings or femicides. And this violence is directly related to the operations and influence of criminal networks and armed gangs. In Honduras, following the coup d'etat, feminicide rates rose by 300% between 2006 and 2012. And then in Haiti, gang violence has displaced over 1 million people, nearly a tenth of the entire population, and more than the population than most of the Caribbean small island developing states. Over half of the population that has been displaced is that of women and children. And I say over half of the 55% because this is not reflective of the actual reality of the population, what it looks like. Huh? And then we know now that within the UN system, well, our estimates statistically are that approximately 300 criminal groups are active within Haiti alone. And of that, 2.7 million Haitians, 1.6 million of whom are women and girls, are living in those gang-controlled areas. Now, this is to really just give the frame, what is happening, how women and girls are affected. Women and girls are not only these victims that are passive to this situation. There are many women and girls who are making the choice to be engaged, and some of them, this choice is a difficult one to make. Sometimes it is a forced choice. Other times, like many young men and boys, it is a choice that is willingly made for multiple reasons. Percentage and the numbers of those who are being trafficked, why they're being trafficked, usually when it comes to sex, trafficking for sex, it is women and girls. When it comes to labor, it is men and boys. Using and the use of the Facebook and other ICT mechanisms and social media to get many of these young women and girls to be trafficked is something that our colleagues at the UN organizations for drug and crime have noted and have programs within the region of Latin America and the Caribbean to deal with. So we're dealing with women and girls getting involved in different ways, but we also know that some of the women and girls are involved not only as exploited, but exploiters. WPHF right now in the Caribbean is only in Haiti, Venezuela, Colombia, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala. This is in spite of the statistics that I have shared before. We have to be making the case consistently as to why more Latin American and Caribbean countries need to be able to get the access to this kind of funding, because we've raised over 251 million in just 9 years. And we want to make sure that those who are in states of non-peace, as the CARICOM Deputy Secretary, well, Assistant Secretary General Elizabeth Solomon consistently says, have access to the financing they need to find the solutions that they think will work. Now, we've already been supporting in the countries that I have named, not as much as we would like, but Haiti and Colombia have had over 7 million in the past few years of our investment. What has been happening and what has been working is that we have been investing in women-led organizations in Haiti, especially in those gang-controlled areas where they are providing services that the state are unable or is unable to provide at this stage, where they're able to also look at social inclusion programs so that more young boys are not tempted to join the gangs. Programs of empowerment so that women and girls are also not tempted to join the gangs. In Colombia, CSOs have played a key role in advancing justice by documenting the sexual violence. And this is an issue that we also have with our statistics in the region. Some say we have a data deficit disorder where we're not sharing or we don't know a lot of those statistics. But the advocacy from these local women-led organizations have led to the opening of a case, Marco Caso Once, right? And it's a groundbreaking legal case, which many of you who are Colombian on the call would know. And I do send, thoughts and prayers is not really what we want to say, but we are standing with Colombia during this very difficult time. What we know works, and this is the key, it's the program to strengthen trust and faith between parliaments and communities. It's a perception of corruption that's the issue. It's not necessarily that it is only happening, it's the perception. Many people don't understand how our parliaments work. They think that the expectations don't meet the reality, and that erodes trust. We need to have more programs engaging local civil society organizations, which requires also trust and faith between those civil society organizations and parliaments, so that communities better understand the work of parliaments. This means they are less likely, generally, less open to joining alternate governance systems, because in many of our societies, that is what the gangs provide, alternate governance systems. Many times, the strengthened social protection services, that is something that works. When communities know they can depend on the state for childcare, when they can depend on the state for healthcare, for access to education, this is something that works. We know in Jamaica, which we can see is one of the only countries in our region that has not had an increase in homicide. And in fact, June 8th, the Jamaica Constabulary Police Force identified as the first day in Jamaica for a very long time with no murders. Successes have been happening in Jamaica because they have been putting in place the different strategies and policies that work. We know from research out of Chicago, when there's investment in early childhood education, people are 7 times less likely to join gangs and participate in organized crime. We see the money that is going in these systems. It is difficult for people to resist if they don't think there's another option for them. So these kinds of strengthened social protection systems and services work. Good governance and transparency, clearly that works. It helps reinforce that trust and faith in our parliaments, in our institutions. Rehabilitation without incarceration. It's another thing that has been proven to work. When we look at many of the crimes, and their programs across the Caribbean, in Grenada, in Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, in the British Virgin Islands, where we have looked at first-time offenders, working with magistrates, working with the legal system to ensure that there is rehabilitation. But this can happen without incarceration through psychosocial programs, behavioral change programs, and the recidivism rates. That means the rates of people going back to crime who have gone through this program are extremely low. It works, but it requires the investments of the state for it to continue. The UN alone, civil society alone should not be supporting these programs alone. Education reform. Many of the young men and boys and the young girls who are getting engaged in organized crime are bored by what our education systems are offering. How can we re-look at what is happening and advocate for more effective, engaging programs that meet young people, men and boys and girls, where they are? Women, Peace and Security has been a framework that has worked in many, many places. Trinidad and Tobago has just launched their Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan. It works because it gives a clear guide. It can't stand alone. We have all of these different national action plans, whether it's an Ending Violence Against Women and Girls action plan. We can't have them in silos. They need to be part of the broader development system, the broader justice approach, the broader financial approach. But when you have one, you have a clear way of identifying the community groups, many of which are led by women, doing really good work. How can you invest in upscaling that and expanding that work across communities? Because the solutions to this situation with organized crime cannot only be top down, it also has to be bottom up. Also, a commitment to multilateral solution. The organized crime, it's working without borders. We can see whether it is illegal fishing or logging. I'm speaking more, and generally, all of these crimes affect the communities, women and men, boys and girls, differently. But I'm speaking more in terms of the crimes that are very gendered in their approach, such as the trafficking in persons, the arms and drugs. And so, if we have a commitment to the multilateral system and solutions, then we're effectively engaging in the same way that these gangs are effectively engaging, because they do have multilateral solutions. They're just not legal multilateral solutions. So these are things we need to engage in as well. What I do want to raise is that when we talk about the impact on women and girls of these crimes, we're talking about the gender analysis of how this is happening. And there's so much confusion right now about what it is we mean by gender. But there's a clear definition. Most of your countries have signed on to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Many of your countries have ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It is not to say that we're only focusing on women. It is to say that we understand their specific and systematized biases that women have faced that make them more marginalized and vulnerable to certain kinds of crime, like these transnational crime, like gender-based violence, and trafficking in person is one aspect of that. But the violence against women, when we talk about the intimate partner violence and domestic violence in the home that is intimate partner violence, if we address that as well, we will start to begin to address the issue of the young people who are making the decision, the choice to join transnational organized crime. Most research coming out of the region, I just saw in the Barbados newspaper as well, the research is showing that the men and boys who are in prison generally have witnessed their mothers being abused by their partners, have been abused as well, child sexual abuse themselves, and often have very low literacy rates and education rates. By strengthening our social protection system and our justice systems, we are looking at prevention, because right now it seems all we're doing is consistently on the back foot, trying to get an effective response. That needs to happen, but we also need to be effectively preventing more and more persons joining the pipeline of transnational organized crime. Thank you.